Welcome back to another episode of the Dandelion podcast, where we talk to the best facilitators, organizers, and hosts using the Dandelion platform at dandelion.events. My name is Stephen Reed, and in this episode, I speak to Adam Taffler, founder of Togetherness and an innovator in the field of human connection. Adam is a speaker, coach, and creator of transformative experiences that help people and organizations cultivate thriving relationships through social technologies. In our conversation, Adam shares the origins of togetherness and goes on to explain circling, authentic relating, and the wheel of consent. We explore how these approaches can enhance our capacity for presence, self-expression, and understanding of giving and receiving in relationship. We then discuss the role of technology in human connection, pondering both the opportunities and challenges presented by AI and exploring Adam's vision for a more connected future. So, join us for this rich exploration of human connection as we consider how these powerful social technologies might reshape our world and deepen our connection with one another. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Adam Taffler. Hello, Adam.
Hey, Stephen, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So I can see on your website, Adam, you describe yourself as a speaker, coach, and innovator in the field of human connection, helping people and organizations create thriving relationships with a suite of social technologies. And I also know that you are the founder of an organization called Togetherness. So maybe to get us going, you could just tell us a bit about your background and what led you to create Togetherness.
Sure. So growing up, I felt like a bit of an outsider. I felt like a bit of a weirdo. And I didn't feel that I belonged at school or even in the groups I was in with my family. And as I got a bit older, I went on this journey of discovery, and I was seeking places where would feel free enough to express myself and make contact with what was really going on inside me. I just felt like I'm just too weird. If I share this with people normally, they're gonna freak out. So I went on a journey looking for these places, and I found some, and I studied clowning and fooling, and I did some psychology, and I trained as a counselor, and I did tantra, and I did all these kinds of relating experiences, and some of them were just amazing and blew me open, and some of them I probably wouldn't go back to, you know. And during the course of that, I didn't really know what to do with myself, so I started various kind of social enterprise type businesses. I ran a speed dating event called Shush Dating, which was speed dating without talking. Okay, like drop the mask and what's it like to play non-verbal games with someone, and then maybe at the end talk about what it was like rather than to come in with all these this is who I am. And I was on stage, I did comedy and I promoted comedy, and I'd done all of these things. And then I think it was 2016, I went to this Tantra festival in London. And as I came in, like the only thing I could describe it as, it felt a bit like a stag do in the 1970s in Eastern Europe. There was like this quite awkward guy on stage with his big belly out. Nothing wrong with that. And he had these women around him doing this sort of devotional dance, and it just felt quite awkward. And that this some of the speakers came up and they were awkwardly reading things off clipboards, and I went to a talk with the founder of this thing, and he just seemed a bit shifty. And the experience I had there was like, wow, there's some good stuff here, but this is dressed up for the chakra brigade, right? This is dressed up for the people who have loads of crystals. Nothing wrong with those things either. But for me, what landed at that festival was this sense of, oh, the world needs more of this, and I feel like I could actually help bring it to more people. And the way I want to do that is through taking away some of the language and grounding things a bit more and making it more about relating. And so I had this very strong feeling that I should start a festival. And the next year I put on Togetherness 2017, which was, I billed it as the world's first festival of human connection, because there's still a bit of a showman energy in me about how can we, make this stand out? And it was brilliant. I think you were there actually. I remember seeing you there, and it felt really good. So I came to Togetherness through my own journey of feeling like a weirdo, and really valuing connecting, really valuing being real with each other, and basically wanting more of that in the world.
Fantastic. So that was 2017, and maybe you can say a little bit about what Togetherness has been up to since.
I've Yeah, I've been on a bit of a journey with it, Stephen. So I did the festival and it seemed like really good and it was in all the newspapers. And then I organized workshops for some of the facilitators. And then I decided I want to be running more of the workshops myself. And I did various programs. I did a camping festival twice, and I run courses and workshops. And over lockdown, I had an online community, but in a way I've still been searching for like what really is this, and how can it be in the world, and how can it be with people. And I think it's fair to say I don't feel like I'm 100% of the way there yet, but I feel like I'm getting closer and closer.
Yeah, an ongoing experiment. You do mention three program offerings on the Togetherness website: relational intelligence, which then speaks about circling, the art of giving and receiving, which I know is related to the Wheel of Consent framework, and authentic leadership. So maybe we can talk a little bit about each of those. So yeah, can you tell us what you mean by relational intelligence and explain circling and authentic relating?
Yeah, so this is based on these these modalities which are, I think, known and out there, right? Authentic relating and circling. And specifically circling it is what really gets me excited. And what I like about it is that it's about being in a space together where we're not trying to resolve anything. We're not trying to fix anything. There's nowhere to get to. And that gives us this permission to sink deeper into that presence. So it's about exploring like, what's it like to be you right now? What's it like to be with this person? And I want to bring a little bit of that in now, actually, Steve.
Sure.
And what's it like to be with you? And I'm enjoying talking to you. I'm feeling curious about you as well. And what I like about this practice is I think it encourages self leadership. It's someone coined this phrase last week in one of my sessions. They said somehow the space where it's okay to be uncomfortable makes it more comfortable to do so. And this is something about connection, which I think is really important, that we need the space to be uncomfortable, to take risks, to explore who we really are in relation to each other. And so these practices, this relational intelligence is really about that. And I see it for me, it shows up for me in my work, in my conversations, and I see it showing up for people who come to these sessions in their sense of confidence and freedom. I just love doing it. And I've actually run a lot of these sessions from my home in Southeast London. And we have a roof terrace on our flat, and we have this dome on the roof. So it's quite special. It's quite like it's a see-through dome, and you can see the sky. And it's quite a special space to be kind of protected, but in touch with what's there.
Nice. Living in Stockholm, I've seen a lot of circling events since I've actually been living here in the past year. It really seems to be taking off. Sometimes I hear it described as a kind of relational meditation. So, is it your sense that it's becoming more popular as well? What do you think might be the reason for that?
Yeah, I think it's really growing a lot. There's some stuff about trademarking, and there's kind of different schools around the world. So it might get renamed as transformational connection.
Mm.
So the reason I'm really into it is, I've studied all kinds of human connection over the years. And when I came across this, it's like, wow, there is this really coherent structure that's quite loose, but also powerful, that can take you really deeply into the moment. It's I find it easier to meditate with others in this way. Often having that feedback of someone being there, testing things out is just great. So I think it's growing because there's a hunger for it. I mean, there's undeniably a massive hunger for this kind of work, and I think circling people choose that because it's quite powerful,
Mm,
and they'll come to a session. They won't really understand what happened. It's not like you can sit someone down and go, oh yeah, this is exactly what circling is, and this is what to expect.
mm.
You can set a context, but it invites you to explore yourself within this context. And it gives people the space to relax into what's happening for me right now. What are the things maybe that I could bring now, which I usually would not see.
Yeah, it certainly has seemed to me like a very good complement to solo sitting meditation. Yeah, I have a sense that they can actually really enhance one another. So something I was interested in is any common challenges that people might face when doing circling for the first time or the first few times. Well, yeah, what comes up for people?
I Yeah, I think the challenge is it's that it's not an incredibly clearly defined thing. So you might be there and you don't really get it, and you might have an idea of what it is, and you might. It's funny because it seems to me that people who come a few times really start to get it. Some people really get it the first time, but I think it can take a little bit. It's like you need to make contact with it to really get it. One of these big challenges is like we're so in our heads, right? We're human doings. And this is really a right brain practice of human beingness. So it can take people a little bit of time to really settle into that. And if you have a good facilitator, they will really help you to drop into that beingness early on.
Nice. So let's move on to another one of your offerings, which is the art of giving and receiving, or the wheel of consent. Can you tell us a little bit more about that framework?
Yeah, this really completely changed my life. I was a massive people pleaser. And pretty much all of my relationships ended because I spent my time trying to imagine what the other person wanted and giving it to them, and then resenting them for, not giving me what I wanted without asking for it. And like, it was a bit of a mess, Stephen. And I came across Betty Martin and that work actually whilst I was still running my speed dating events. And what it does is it takes apart the dynamics of giving and receiving, because in our culture they're really mixed up. We have this feeling of giving to get, which is what I was doing, right? I was like trying to imagine, what do you want, give it to you, and then I feel like you owe me something. And right, I'm sure people can relate to this. When we take these dynamics apart, we can see that giving is not attached to receiving. Like, it can feel wonderful to give someone some, it can feel great, but we should give only what we're willing to give with a whole heart and with absolutely no strings attached. And when we set up a container like that, the person receiving can relax into that. They can know that, oh, this is just a walk together, or it doesn't mean the other person's thinking about spending the night with me, or we and it's the same with receiving. So when we're really clear on what it is we're receiving, we know we're going to receive only that and nothing more. We can really relax into it, and it can go all the way into our heart and melt us. And that will always hit a level of our own feelings of unworthiness. That's why we can often find it hard to receive stuff. We can find it uncomfortable. So this program, this work is about getting really clear on these things, getting clear on our boundaries. And also it's about our relationship with desire. And I really feel passionately about standing for our desire. And I think that desire gets a bad reputation in lots of places. And when it's a compulsion, that's something else. But I'm more interested in like the longings of your heart, the deeper, more mystical and less trodden pathways that we tend to push down and suppress. And I'm all for opening those up. And because in this work, it's like when you're in touch with your desires, it's like opening the inner sails of your ship so that you can move forward. And you might think that what you're wanting is to get to that island where you're having this experience and that's happening. And as the sails open, you'll get closer and you might see it and you might think, actually, that's not what I want, but maybe it's something else over here. And desire relationship with our desires can move us forward in our lives in a way that I think is really underestimated and really treated badly in our culture.
I've done a bit of work with the wheel of consent, and a phrase that really stuck with me in my encounter with it was for whose pleasure. And I realized that I'd been in like a number of quite ridiculous situations where I was like, well, I thought you were enjoying this. And the other person says, well, I thought you were enjoying this. And like, actually, neither person wanted to be doing that thing. But because there wasn't clarity and actually like who is actually, giving the gift, then you can get yourself into these sometimes quite absurd situations. So yeah, I hear you about just like really tuning into desire and allowing that desire. And also it seems to do a lot for just clarity in relationship.
It's like a comedy sketch, right, where both people are doing something, neither's enjoying it, both enduring it, both thinking it's for the other part, and everyone's too polite to say anything about it. I have a little story about my niece. I thought I'm going to be a good uncle and I'm going to take her to Hamleys and I'm going to buy her a gift. I'm like, look, let's go to Hamleys and I'll buy you something that you want. And she immediately said, Uncle Adam, I want a Rubik's Cube. Now, that didn't sound very exciting to me. So I said, okay, well, let's go and have a look in the whole store and see if maybe there's something else that you want instead. And we looked through the whole store, and I think it was the third level. They had these crossbows that fired corks and with little targets. And I said, oh, that looks really interesting. Why don't you get that? And she looked at me. She was about 7 at the time. Okay, she's very smart. She looked at me dead in the eye. She said, Uncle Adam, I think you would play with that more than I would. And that was a really interesting thing about who is this really for? And it really landed for me like, oh, I wanted that for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really relate also to this sense of having become familiar with that framework. It can show up in so many different areas of life. It's certainly not just confined to romantic relationships, let's say. So, yeah, I'm curious if you see some connection or what you see the connection is between circling and the Wheel of Consent framework.
Circling is really good for any kind of personal growth and self-discovery that you're doing. Because have you heard of this thing called alexithymia?
Actually, no.
It's I was at a psychedelic society members talk the other day with Bessel van der Kolk, and he mentioned this. It was great, by the way. Everyone should become a member if you're not already. He mentioned this thing alexithymia, which apparently 10% of the population have, but up to 30 or 40% of people who have mental health issues. And it's when you can't describe your feelings or your emotions, like you can't say what's going on, like you don't know what's going on. So that's a fundamental thing for relating. Circling helps you to become more sensitive to yourself and others in a way that you can start describing things. There's a principle which is called staying with the level of sensation. So even if you're in a conversation with someone and you're just feeling blank, you can still go to this. Oh, I notice I'm feeling blank. And maybe there are other layers you can go, oh, it's like, I feel like I'm in this endless tundra, or, oh, I feel like I'm frozen. And so it will help you, whatever personal growth that you're doing. And I've had a lot of people who come and they do my 6 week courses, and then they go off and do like a meditation week and stuff. And they're like, wow, I'm so glad I did this first. This completely changed the way I do that. So I think it's the same with the art of giving and receiving. A lot of it is about slowing down and tuning in, not jumping to doing, but slowing down, being with the choosing. There's a process we talk about: noticing, trusting, valuing, and then communicating. Noticing, what is it that I want right now? Oh, I think I don't want to do this exercise. I think I want to go and curl up on the sofa and sleep. Trusting that, oh, is it okay to do that? I don't know. I'm here and I've paid the money and everyone else is doing it. They're going to think I'm weird. But then valuing, like, oh, that is what I want to do. And then communicating. And so it can help bring us into our autonomy.
I'm wondering if you'd like to tell us a bit about how your own journey with connection and relationships has evolved through these kind of practices and your work with togetherness. What changes have you seen in your own life?
My mother lives in Wales, and she comes to London sometimes, and I go to visit her. But we see each other, I don't know, 8 times a year, maybe. And a few years ago, when I was studying the Wheel of Consent, she came to visit, and we were there at the Covent Garden having some delicious drink. And she was telling me about all the farmers around where she lives, and like what happened to this guy's tractor and what happened with that guy's leg that got broken. And I had a sense that she was wanting to connect with me, and she was telling me all this stuff, almost like she's afraid that suddenly it's going to stop. But I noticed that I wasn't feeling comfortable with it. I felt like I was under this barrage. And a bit of me was like, oh, she's my mom and I don't want to offend her and I should just listen. But another part of me was like, this isn't okay with me right now. I need to do something. So I said, Mum, I notice this feels like a bit much right now. Are you willing to sit with me for a moment in silence? And because my mum is just utterly amazing, she said, all right then. And we sat there, and this space opened up between us. And for one of the first times in my life, maybe, I had this sense that this woman she's not just my mother, but she's this completely independent woman in her own right. She's this independent soul in time and space that's here. And I'm an independent soul. And we're just here in this moment, in this lifetime meeting. And I had this sense of all these other relationships and layers to our connection that was going on. And that spaciousness, that it's shifted something in our relationship. And I think that came from doing these embodied practices around the art of giving and receiving, practicing waking up the hands through my skin, practicing noticing what is it that I'm wanting, practicing communicating, noticing it, communicating it before it built up so much in the past, I might have just said nothing, got tense, got angry, and then just abruptly finished things. So that's just one example. Do you want another example?
Go for it.
So that the mother of my child, my partner, we'd been seeing each other for a while, and probably like a lot of relationships, that we hadn't talked about what's the structure here, we're just kind of seeing each other, right? It's kind of safer that way, right? So anyway, we had been out to this New Year's Eve party together, and we were lying in bed together the next day. And I turned to her and I said, I want you to be my girlfriend. And she looked at me and said, wow, that's intense. And then she said, I'd love to. And strictly speaking, when we want something, the way to do it is to make a request, because that was a statement, will you be my girlfriend? But it felt powerful and it felt good. And we've been together ever since.
Nice. And you think your ability to kind of express or to tune into your desires and then express them clearly had been honed through the practices that you've been speaking of. Yeah.
Absolutely trusting myself and taking the risk.
Yeah, nice one. Let's turn to a slightly different topic. which is the role of technology in human connection, a topic that I know we're both quite interested in. So, yeah, how have you seen technology changing the art of giving and receiving, changing the art of authentically relating, and where do you think it's heading?
Well, it's a very exciting time, and I think it's an incredibly scary time. I I think there's so many people who are really lonely and who shut themselves off from the world, who having a kind of therapeutic AI chatbot could be amazing for. My fear is that it could so easily replace contact with real humans. I've been researching this a bit. People who have these chatbot girlfriends and boyfriends say it's the most fulfilling relationship they've ever had in their life. And then you think about, well, what happens when robotics gets better and better? And so my fear is around these, this can take us further into disembodiment. There's another layer. It's a bit like with COVID in the UK and around the world, people realized, oh, I don't think I want to live in a city, in a tiny box. I think I want to live in nature. Like that became, nature became a much higher value. And the sense that I get is with AI doing all this other stuff, we're going to get back into, wow, human connection, and particularly these layers of it that we don't experience in our everyday lives. We're going to see those things incredibly valuable again. So I think the I feel like I'm on the edge of this wave, which is emergent, and maybe it's like maybe I got on it a bit too early or something, but it's like I feel like there's this emergent edge, which is very exciting. I would like to see chatbots and support that challenge and that makes space for discomfort. So if you had a chatbot that supports you and is with you, but it's taking you on this journey from being alone in your flat, talking to it, to going out on the street, to talking with other people, to joining online groups, like, yes, that's how we need to harness this thing. I was listening to a podcast with Tristan Harris, Center for Humane Technology, and Esther Perel, people I love, both of them. And Esther Perel said, I've been to loads of these AI conferences and no one talked about relationships and relating. Like it's not on the map. So there's something about the way this area is currently being approached where I think it's a bit of a blind spot. So I'm really wanting to make a stand now for relating, and I want to explore that. And I actually feel quite inspired to create a symposium around this. So if there's anyone listening who's interested in this, please do reach out to me, adam@togetherness.com, and let's talk about it.
Nice. I thought that was really interesting what you said about using these AIs to actually help people get out there ultimately into the real world and actually interact with other human beings, because that seems to be quite different to what many of them are being designed for at the moment, which is basically, well, profit, isn't it? It's just that it's like to trap an individual in some monthly subscription to keep talking to that particular AI. And one wonders what would it take for to have these AI systems essentially to aim for their own obsolescence in a way. Like what is necessary to get someone to a point that actually they're like, oh well, actually I don't need you anymore. So that's a very provocative thought, and I'd love to attend this symposium if and when it happens. So sign me up for sure. Yeah, and I think you're also right that as more and more tasks and functions that we previously thought was quite human things actually start or are now able to be done quite effectively by AIs, it will tune us into that which is left to help us really discover what is the real core of being human. Those really special things that actually no machine can or will ever be able to replicate in any effective way. I mean, do you have a sense of what those things might be? Those things that are going to continue to be uniquely human?
It's such a great question, and I'm so with you on that. I think we're going to discover more and more. I'm not sure I can articulate it, but let me see if I can. I had this teacher, Jonathan Kay, who I think you might have come across, this fooling teacher. And he used to take us into these meditations where we see this other person, where we see the face as the front part of them, but it's like it's the front of this triangle that goes back into infinity. And in that triangle are all these experiences that this person's ever had, all of their dreams, all of the places they've been that touched them, the times they fell over, and then also their parents and their parents' experiences and the land and the territory, and going back to like everyone's struggles and joys and lovemaking and birthing, and we start to experience each other not as something that can be reduced to inputs and outputs and numbers, but as a great mystery. And how is that going to work with AI? I'm like, the jury's out, man, because I think AI is going to be way more capable than people can even imagine right now. I talked to a therapist who was telling me about a session with someone who didn't say anything for like 10 sessions. And I think the 10th session at the end, the client said something like, "Oh, it's my birthday, and no one sent me a card or something." And the therapist just put their arm on the person, they said something like, "Oh, happy birthday. Hope you have a nice day." And the client then completely opened up. And the therapist was saying, AI can never do that. It can never do that. It can never understand that. I'm like, do you know what? It probably will. If it gets enough data, if it gets enough data, it can probably know that, oh, there's an intervention to happen here that can cause this. So there's something about the mystery. And okay, this is my hope, Stephen, as well, that we're going to come back to having a coherent spirituality along with our science and development. We're going to integrate those things. I think AI is going to, in a way, lead us back to spirituality.
In the world where togetherness is maximally successful, let's say, and like everyone's doing circling and everyone is familiar with the art of receiving and giving, like what does that world look like? How has society changed when these practices are pervasive?
Human connection is a much higher priority and value in the way that we're doing everything. In the way we're designing our products and technologies and our services. And it's like the world is much smaller again. We don't need to live in massive cities. We live in smaller communities. They're connected by these windy roads. You can walk from place to place, and on the way you meet people and you have a coffee and you see a donkey, and your child's walking along next to you, and then you find yourself in the evening camping around a fire with people singing the song of life together. It's about, at its core for me, it's about a shift in our values. That's like the ultimate thing. And I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think AI is going to speed it up.
Nice. People often talk about a kind of epidemic of loneliness that we're experiencing in the Western world, at least, and how consumerism might be related to that. I do have this feeling that, well, I speak for myself. Sometimes I'm, buying things on Amazon or going to the shops to try to self-medicate, almost like a feeling of loneliness that I'd rather not feel. But the catch is that, like, I'm looking in the wrong place. Well, we're all looking in the wrong place. Like that, no amount of shopping can fill a hole, which is actually there due to a lack of human connection and relationship in my life at times, and our lives perhaps more generally. And so I'm curious, or let's say I would expect actually a world where we're all much more engaged in these practices and we're all much more connected to one another, is also a world where we're shopping less, and with the knock-on positive effects that would have on the environment. Does that resonate in some way?
Totally. I mean, I think it's going to seem weird. I think people are going to look back at us and the consumerism, and I want to say great for all the benefits, great for all the people being lifted out of poverty, great for all the advancements in healthcare. That's all great. But I think we're going to look back and find it weird that we would buy something made in plastic from China and we have no connection to it, because I think we're all going to be gathering around our friend Bella, who's bringing her handmade leather bags with these like custom designs that reflect, what's really important for her. And I think there's going to be a lot more meaning in our things. So we're not going to need as many things, but we're going to have things that are much more meaningful for us.
So a society based around relationship is not actually just about relating with one another, but it's about the stories that we have in our objects even as well. Yeah, like a bag made by a particular person for a particular occasion, which has much more meaning than just some generic thing.
That's right. And you're going to want to go to, I don't know, Stroud for the gathering because Bella might be there with her bags and it's like you can't buy them online. You can't just get them 24/7. It's like you can only get them when you see her in person or what. So it's I feel like it's going to weave everything back together again.
Interesting. So that really makes me realize the ways in which your work is also about meaning and story as well as relationships. So thank you for filling that out for me a bit. Okay, nice. Well, I'm wondering if you have any upcoming events or projects that you'd like to tell us about.
I want to say that I run these evening sessions in the dome on my roof roughly once a week. So if you're ever in London and you'd like to have an interesting experience, come along. I got an upcoming online workshop on how to get in touch with what you really, really want, which is quite a small thing. It's going to be really good. And I run the art of giving and receiving workshops a few times a year. So you can check my website for details on that.
There is actually one coming up in 2 days at the point at which we're speaking, but I'm not sure this podcast is going to be out before then, but we will include links to all Adam's work in the show notes so you can find out when the next similar workshop is happening. Well, another thing that I wanted to mention is that the third thing you offer on the Togetherness website is authentic leadership. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about what that is and why people might want to get in touch with you on authentic leadership?
Thanks, Stephen. It tends to be people who've come and done some of my work and they're like, wow, we really need some of this in our team. People really aren't talking and what I tend to do is quite bespoke work. So I'll come in and I've got a whole suite of really brilliant micro technologies or little interventions that we can do that just invite people to safely bring a little bit more of their personal selves into their professional self, into their work life. And what we find is that it really deepens people's relationships. It really helps it's almost like it's not about taking your whole mask off, but it's about maybe lifting it a little bit. And that allows for much more richer culture and support of each other in the workplace.
Nice. So listeners, please note, this is not just something you will do in your own time, but you could actually invite Adam into your workplace, perhaps at some point. Okay, well, what advice would you give to someone who's listened to this podcast, is feeling like, this sounds pretty interesting, I could be up for coming to Adam's Dome, but is maybe still feeling a little bit hesitant or scared, wondering if this is really for them?
Oh, I like that touches me, that question, Stephen, because there's been a lot of times in my life where I've been feeling that, like I've been wanting to go and check it out, but I've been a bit scared. I've been a bit worried. So you could ask a friend to come with you. You could get in touch with me and ask me any questions that you have. I want to speak now to that actually. So everything that I do, it's not about getting to a specific state. It's not about doing everything that I'm saying. It's about slowing down and noticing and choosing. So in that sense, it's like a safer, because things are never 100% safe, but a safer laboratory to explore yourself. So just jump in.
Nice. Well, Adam, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm wondering if there's any final things you'd like to share with us, any other topics on your mind?
No, this is great, Stephen. I've really enjoyed this. Thanks so much.
Right. So yeah, you can find Adam's work on Dandelion, and we'll include links to his website and the Togetherness website in the show notes. Okay, until next time, take care.
Thank you.